I only read one book, but it's a good book, don't you know? I act the way I act because the good book tells me so. If I want to know how to be good, it's to the good book that I go. Because the good book is a book, and it is good, and it's a book.
Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. And the Lord did like many things, such as herb, lamb kebabs, and cows, but the one thing that the Lord did like above all things was a good list. And he commanded the writers of the generations of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, to write him a good list. And it was so. The sons of Japheth: Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Dubal, and Mashech, and Tiras. And the Lord did like the word and, for it did make things more interesting than but a comma alone. And the sons of Gomer: Ashkenaz, and Rephath, and Togmah, and Bani, and Fred. And they did all take turns in an evening at spit-roasting Betty and Wilma, and did live in a town called Bedrock, and were a modern Stone Age family. And the sons of Javan: Elijah, and Tarshish, Kittim, Dodanim. And the Lord was angry, for he did notice that the word and had been missed out from between Tarshish and Kittim, and did consider sending a great curse upon the earth. But he did instead slowly count to 10, and did feel a lot better for it. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. As obviously, in only a couple of generations they had developed different languages, such that the grandparents could not understand a word that the grandchildren were saying. So there was nothing new there then. And the sons of Ham: Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan, were but one short of a five-a-side football team, and so they were not allowed to play, and they did get around this problem by getting one of their sisters to dress up as a boy, and they did have great fun in the showers afterwards, because whereas in the opening chapters of this book, where there was the possibility of there being numerous unrelated women to marry, as God had killed everyone on the planet aside from Noah and his family with the global flood, the furthest and most distant relation that any woman they could marry could possibly be would be a cousin. And so their children did have webbed feet, and they could play the banjo like you wouldn't believe. And the sons of Cush: Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Sabbatachah. And the sons of Ramah: Sheba, and Deban. For the writers of this chapter did realize that the sons of Ramah were so utterly uninteresting that they did not warrant a verse all of their own. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth, which wasn't all that difficult, as the rest of them did absolutely fuck all worth mentioning, other than being born. Seriously, in a time when there was no more than 150 people on the planet, not one of them did anything that was worth commenting on, aside from Nimrod. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord, which is a bit like saying that someone is a mighty hunter because people say he is a mighty hunter, and not that he is a mighty hunter because he is actually good at hunting stuff, as even back then circular reasoning was not seen as a bit of a problem. And after all, such reasoning is the whole reason that this book is so popular anyway. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar, and nobody thought it a little odd that just 2 generations after Noah there were enough people on the planet to fill several large towns and cities. Out of that land went forth Asher, whoever or whatever that is, as up to now Asher has not been mentioned. Nam builded Nineveh, and the city Reboth, and Calah, and Resen between Nineveh and Calah. The same is a great city, full of the direct descendants of Noah, and they could all play the banjo really well. And then the guy who did like writing lists did come back from lunch and did pick up from where it did leave off. And at some point in the far future, when people would come to realize that all of this was utter nonsense, a man would come who would try and read this book in a humorous and literal way. And he would look upon this chapter and despair. for it is truly like reading a telephone directory. And Mizraim begat Ludim, and Ananim, and Lebaim, and Naphtuim, and they liked running around in the desert in just their underwear, waving their arms around, frightening the sheep. And Pathrusim, and Calshuim, out of whom came Philistim, and Caphtorim, and Bogrim, and Tiny Tim, and you could tell they were all manly men, because they had him at the ends of their names rather than her. And Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and thankfully the writer of this chapter did decide to summarize the next part, for they had run out of new, hard-to-pronounce names, without his sounding like a science fiction story set on the planet Zargle, and they would soon have to invent last names, as everyone did seem to insist on calling their sons Dave. So in summary, he did begat his own close family. And the Jebusite, and the Amorite, who would go on to make paint, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Arkite, and the Sinite, and the Solvite, and the Arkite, who did suffer from a terrible stutter, and in later years did go on to open a corner shop in Doncaster that would be open all hours, and they would employ their nephew, Granville, as a delivery boy, and they did lust after Nurse Gladys Emmanuel, who lived just across the road. But he was not finished yet, for he did not have a television, so the family just kept on growing. And the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite, and afterwards were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad, for they had managed to fill all of the available space where they lived, for they were randy buggers, and did get it on quite often. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, unto Gaza, as thou goest unto Sodom, and Gomorrah, and Amdah, and Zeboim, even unto Lasha, which means absolutely nothing at all to most people who would read this in the future, as they would have absolutely no idea where any of these places were, apart from Gaza, which would be in the news quite a lot. These are the sons of Ham, after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their nations, and trusteth me, the Lord was bored to tears with this mindless waffle, and did urge the guy writing this to hurry upon to the next exciting bit, where he could come down from heaven in a mighty rage, and do some smiting. But alas, unto Shem also, the father of all children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder. Even to him were children born, and we are going to list them all, every single one of them, as if the reader really gives a rat's arse. The children of Shem, Elam and Asher, who had gone out before and builded Nineveh, thus proving that this whole narrative is once again out of sequence, and Arphad, and Lud, and Aram, and the children of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mash, for he had a twisted sense of humour, and would have named his next child Chips, and the other one after that Boiled, had his wife let him. And Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. And at this point the narrator did have to go back a couple of verses, just to check something. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And when the narrator did go back those 3 verses to check, he did find that it did say that Shem was the father of all the children of Eber. So it must surely mean, if all of this is to be taken literally, that Shem did knock up his great-granddaughter-in-law twice, and the narrator did go off and vomit. And Joktan begat Almadad, and Shelf, and Hazmanath, and Jerah, and Hadaram, and Uznal, and Dikla, who had a mom who was a milf, and Obal, and Abmiel, and Sheba, who get fed to pets as pet food, and Ophi, and Havilah, and Jobab. And all these were the sons of Joktan, for he was like the Duracell bunny in bed, and his wife's knees had not been next to each other in some time. And their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. And it was surprising that they all fitted inside, and they did go to see the local council to see if they could get a bigger house, for they did live like kings on all the child support payments, for Joktan could not find a job that paid so well. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. And we are truly thankful that this bit is over, for the reader would be slitting their wrists by now, and the listener would have them set themselves on fire. These are the families of the sons of Noah, after their generations, in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. And up in heaven the Lord did slowly continue to count up to 10, and did forgive the guy writing this part of the Bible for not mentioning cows in any way. However, it is interesting to note that several years later he was trampled to death by a herd of stampeding cattle, and one might consider that such an occurrence might just act as a subtle reminder for any future authors.